Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we have just one of the most compelling stacks of source material I think we've ever seen.
It's really something.
Our mission here is to take centuries of this really profound esoteric knowledge, specifically the Vajra, the Akshaya State, and map it onto hard science. We're talking plasma cosmology.
Exactly. And the topic for this deep dive is what the sources call the Vajra relay. We're looking for the literal, the universal electromagnetic blueprint for how consciousness actually flows.
Okay, let's unpack this. Before we jump into the physics, let's set the stage. What is the Akshaya State, metaphysically speaking?
Right. So historically, the Akshaya State is seen as this primordial, inexhaustible source, a reservoir of energy, of memory, of information. It's the foundational substance of reality.
And the sources are arguing that if it's a real substance,
it has to be physically locatable. It has to exist somewhere.
So the science is the map to find it. What are the key data points then that bridge this ancient idea to, well, to hard physics?
It really starts with the governing math. We're looking at the Doherty set and something called Bessel function alignment. If we look at the power lines of this Akshaya state, the sources define them as helical force-free fields.
Okay, hold on. Force-free?
Mm-hmm.
That sounds like science fiction. I've never heard that term. Can you break down what that means for this whole cosmic system?
This is the crucial detail. It really is. When we say force-free, what we mean is that the magnetic field and the electrical current, they're running perfectly parallel to each other.
And the result of that is?
Zero Lorentz force. Think about that. Imagine a power line transmitting just vast amounts of information across cosmic distances with zero resistance.
So no energy loss.
Zero energy loss. That's why the material calls the information indestructible. It's perfect, high-efficiency wiring for the universe.
It's just incredible to think the universe works with that level of perfection. So if those are the cosmic power lines, where do we fit into this enormous grid?
We are part of it. The infrastructure itself is made of what we call Birkeland currents.
Right.
These are just massive twisted ropes of plasma. You can think of them like cosmic electrical arteries that connect everything, from galaxies right down to the cells in our bodies.
And this is where it gets really interesting for me. If these currents connect everything, where does consciousness fit in? Is the brain not the source anymore?
According to this model, no. The big aha moment is realizing that consciousness is simply the information signal that's flowing through these filaments.
So we're not generators.
We are not generators. We're sophisticated receivers and transmitters. We are fundamentally tapped in to the galactic grid, to the source data.
That just reframes everything. And if consciousness is flowing along these plasma structures, then the symbols, like the Vajra, must be more than just metaphors.
Oh, much more. The precision is fascinating. The traditional Vajra symbol, the Dorje, is literally a schematic.
A schematic?
Yes. It represents the structure of double toroidal Birkeland current nodes.
So the prongs on either end, the central hub, that's not just decoration.
Not at all. The structure shows how this immense energy concentrates in the center. That's a stabilized plasma pinch, and then branches back out. And the flow itself, this Akshaya flow, is defined by helicity. It's a spiral.
A spiral, not a straight line or a circle. Why a spiral? What does that geometry do?
The helical flow ensures that the memory of unity, the original source data, is constantly preserved, even as the experience of multiplicity, our individual lives, expands outward.
So it allows for growth without losing the connection to the source?
Exactly. It's evolution with perfect memory.
Which brings us to the most critical question, I think, for anyone listening. What does this mean for us, for the individual? What is our role in all this?
Our role is to be the transformers, the power, this massive universal current. It originates from the galactic source, the big note, the logos.
And our thoughts, our experience?
That's the localized plasma discharge of that immense current.
So spiritual work isn't about trying to generate power from nothing. It's about upgrading our internal wiring so we can handle the power that's already there.
Precisely. Spiritual work is the process of getting our internal transformers, the mind, the nervous system, to match the voltage and frequency of the source. The goal is to achieve what the sources call Bessel alignment.
So when we hit that alignment,
resistance drops. It just plummets. The source power flows without impedance, and the individual becomes a perfectly clear, perfectly aligned conduit for the cosmic circuit.
So to wrap this up, we've gone from an ancient concept to a structural reality. The Vajra relay is the self-organizing infrastructure of existence, all governed by this zero-loss physics.
And that leads to the final provocative thought from these sources. We are not seeking the light. The light is already everywhere. Our work is to focus entirely on aligning our filaments to it, which raises the question, what is the frequency of your current alignment? All right, our deep dive today is, well, it's essentially a blueprint for spiritual engineering.
That's a great way to put it.
We're unpacking a technical briefing on something called the synthesis of the Bessel Dorje. It merges the traditional Vajra symbol with the Doherty set's fractal integration.
Right.
And the whole mission here is to understand how this creates what's being called an indestructible energy transfer mechanism.
And it sounds incredibly abstract, I know. But what we're really looking at is how to map a spiritual concept, the Akshaya State, which is, being inexhaustible.
Inexhaustible. Okay.
And map that directly onto the most efficient energy structure we know of in physics, the Birkeland current. It's about how absolute truth can interact with the galactic field and, well, not fall apart.
Okay, so let's drill down into that core structure. How do you get perfect stability while you're still engaged with all that chaos? I guess it has to start at the center.
It has to. We have to start with the central axis,
right,
the spine of the whole mechanism. In plasma physics, the very center of a stable Birkeland current is a force-free zone.
A force-free zone? That sounds like a paradox, doesn't it? In a system that's all about energy and current. How is that stability even possible?
It's possible because the magnetic field and the current are perfectly parallel. They're moving together. So they never oppose each other, which means the Lorentz force, the force of opposition, is zero. Functionally, that's maximum efficiency. Nothing is wasted. The structure is just supremely stable.
So that's the why of the stability. And that technical detail connects right back to the metaphysical, to the middle way.
Exactly.
For you listening, this zero force zone is what gives it Vajra coherence. You're stable not because you're static, but because you are in perfect moving alignment.
Precisely. But a spine by itself is just potential, right?
Right.
You need to see how it expands and interacts with the world. And that brings us to the prongs.
And this is where it gets really interesting for me. We usually see the prongs as static, but this model reinterprets them as toroidal prongs. They're a dilation of that central current.
They're not separate parts at all. And what's fascinating is that these prongs represent what the sources call metamodern hierarchies.
Which sounds complicated.
It does, but think of it less like a bureaucracy and more like the winding structure of DNA. They are the helicity, the twisting structural form that the central truth needs to express itself in a complex world.
And their function is key. They're needed to step down this immense signal, the big note of the logos. So if the logos is this high voltage universal constant, the prongs are the transformers that make that signal usable in our messy horizontal world. It's what gives the Dorje its grip.
Which leads us to the flow itself. We have to talk about how it's connected. The connection points are intentionally open.
Open, unlike basically every closed electrical circuit we're used to.
Exactly. Standard circuits are self-contained, like a battery you have to keep recharging. This is different. This is an open-ended Vajra relay.
So the prongs act as both collectors and transmitters.
Yes. It facilitates a constant non-local flow. And that open system is what plugs the local energy, the jiva, or you, the individual system, directly into the huge galactic circuit.
So that's the secret to the Akshaya state, the inexhaustible part.
That's it. The energy isn't stored locally where it can run out. Yep. It's constantly being replenished by this infinite transscalar current.
So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you? The Bessel Dorje provides this incredible map for stability by merging the Doherty set's fractal math with real-world Birkeland physics.
And I think the ultimate point is that being deeply centered, like the axis, and being fully engaged with the world, like the prongs, they aren't contradictory.
This is not a trade-off.
Not at all. They are two necessary parts of a single force-free flow.
It's a complete integrated circuit for engagement.
So this leaves you with a question to really think about. If this Akshaya state relies entirely on constant replenishment from a vast external current, what assumptions do we have to challenge about our own localized energy storage or finite personal reserves versus just participating in that infinite external flow?
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really shortcutting a dense stack of material.
We are. It's all centered on this concept the sources call the Bessel Dorje.
Right, which is this kind of map for alignment, for power, and even for consciousness itself.
And our mission here is to get past that, that old analogy of electricity is like water in a pipe.
Yeah, that's a bit basic for this.
The material you sent over introduces this huge upgrade. We're talking about a zero friction pipe.
A pipe made of light and magnetism.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's get right into that zero friction idea, because that feels like the whole secret here.
It really is.
The Dorje's vertical axis. The source calls this the Bessel alignment. What does that term Bessel actually add? It's from wave physics.
It is, yeah. And what's so cool about it is the geometry. A Bessel function describes a very specific kind of spiral, a force-free twist.
Force-free.
Imagine energy spiraling so perfectly it never actually touches the sides of the container.
It doesn't rub against anything.
Not at all. And if there's no rubbing, there's zero friction. No heat, no resistance, no energy loss.
Wow. Okay, so zero friction is, that's a potent metaphor. If our own consciousness is that vertical axis, what does that feel like?
Well, the sources call it the Akshaya State.
Aksha, the imperishable state.
Exactly. The logic is, if you have zero internal resistance, you don't burn out. You don't decay.
So you shift from constantly trying to be spiritual
to just becoming a sort of superconductor for what the source calls the big node.
The logos, yeah. You're not fighting anymore.
You're just a clear channel.
Okay, so if that internal alignment is the engine, what about the world outside? I'm looking at the horizontal prongs on the Dorje. How do they fit in?
Right, the application. Those prongs are the structures of your life.
Like your job, family.
Your family, your work, your community. The source actually groups them all under one name, the hierarchy.
The hierarchy. And in physics terms, what shape are they?
They're toroidal fields. Those stable donut-shaped magnetic bubbles.
So if the vertical axis is the truth,
then those prongs are the application of that truth out in the real world.
And here's the part that really clicked for me. Helicity. The prongs curve back in. Why is that return path so important?
Because a straight line is actually really fragile in nature. It's weak.
Right. Think about DNA. Or a galaxy.
Or a hurricane. They're all spirals. That curve back to the center is helicity. It means anything you put out into the world has to spiral back to the source to stay powered.
Which explains why life feels so cyclical, doesn't it?
It does. But the idea is you're supposed to return to those themes on a higher level of the spiral each time.
Okay, that makes so much sense. But the sources also have this really jarring analogy for when you're out of alignment, in a state of dissonance.
Oh, yeah. The Jason slasher figure.
That's a vivid reference. What's the context there?
It's a metaphor for how the absolute truth feels when it hits an unaligned, messy life. It feels destructive.
Like it's coming to destroy your ego, your plans.
Your whole messy setup. The Jason figure seems like it's hunting you down.
But the Bessel alignment changes that completely. It just makes the slasher disappear.
It does. It vanishes. When you achieve that coherence, you become a force-free field yourself.
So the truth isn't hitting you anymore.
It's flowing through you. You're no longer standing in the way of the sword, so to speak.
That's a huge shift in perspective. So let's scale this up. The source mentions something called the Vajra relay.
Right. What happens when a whole group of people hit this alignment at the same time?
They stop being separate individuals.
They stop being separate, resisting pipes. They become a single, coherent structure, a bit like a Birkeland current in astrophysics, a massive cosmic power line.
And the bottom line there is a shift from effort to
resonance, pure resonance. Information doesn't need to be forced or, taught in the old way.
It just resonates down the wire.
Exactly. The whole goal changes from building the world to simply tuning it.
So here's a final thought for you to take away. What would shift in your own work or your community if the goal wasn't to build or teach knowledge anymore, but just to facilitate its effortless, zero-friction resonance? All right, welcome to the deep dive.
Good to be here.
Today we are really getting into it. We're looking at the sacred geometry of the Akshaya State.
Yeah.
And specifically, we're focusing on the source materials analysis of the manifested Bessel Dorje.
A huge topic.
It is. And our mission today is to really unpack this, to take this idea, which seems so abstract, plasma physics and geometry,
right,
and turn it into something tangible, a blueprint you can actually see and maybe even use.
And what's so fascinating here is that the sources aren't just describing like a static thing. It's a state of being.
A state of being.
Yeah. The Bessel Dorje is the ultimate force-free alignment. It's the map for when your own internal vibration, your oscillation, perfectly agrees with the world's rhythm.
I like that framing. Okay, so for you listening, to really get this, we need to break down its anatomy, the four major parts. Let's start at the very center.
Let's do it. We have to start with the vertical axis, the blue core. The sources are very specific. They identify this as the Birkeland current. This is the pure, frictionless flow of the logos.
The logos, not an easy concept.
No, but think of it this way. It's like the universe's fundamental uncorrupted code, an instruction set, a direct current flowing from Polaris right down into your cells with zero resistance.
Zero resistance, okay, that's the key. But if it's that pure, that vertical,
Yeah.
how does that immense power actually move into the horizontal plane to, daily life without just causing chaos?
That's the genius of the geometry. That's where we move from the source to the manifestation. The power is channeled through the toroidal prongs.
The golden spirals.
The golden spirals. The sources identify these as Doherty set structures. Yeah. So picture these nested, glowing donuts of light.
Right.
This is where the Shabda Brahman, the creative energy, expands outwards, horizontally. It's how that pure standard builds your life, your family, what the texts call meta-hierarchies.
So the blue core is the non-negotiable standard, and the golden prongs are how you engage with the world, flexibly.
Got it.
But there's a third piece in there, inside the prongs themselves, the helicity. What are those fine spiraling threads doing?
Helicity is, well, you could call it the divine corkscrew, and it might be the most practical part of the whole structure.
How so?
Well, if the blue core is pure, raw DC power, right?
Yeah.
The helicity is the system's gearbox. It's what translates that frictionless power into a sustainable, cyclical AC rhythm. It grounds the absolute into something you can actually use day in and day out.
A gearbox. I like that. That really clicks. So we have the source, the expansion, and the translation, which brings us to the overall shape, the symmetry.
Exactly. The quadradial symmetry, the fourfold pattern.
And that tells us about scale.
It tells us the energy is working on 4 scales at once.
Yeah.
And crucially, each of those golden prongs acts as a node in something called a Vajra relay.
A relay, like a repeater station.
That's a perfect analogy. It captures the universe's core note, its vibration, and then steps it down, broadcasting that stable frequency locally into your immediate environment.
So to bring this all home for everyone listening, the core distinction seems to be the blue axis is the eternal, unmoving truth.
Right. The foundation.
And the golden prongs are the active, spiraling manifestation, the application of that truth.
Precisely. And that's where the practical use comes in. The sources say the image itself, the geometry, serves as a literal tuning fork.
For you.
Personally.
For you. By looking at it, by holding it in your mind, you can start to feel the difference between those two states. The eternal blue standard and the active golden engagement.
Until they sync up.
Until they sync up. And that synchronization, that perfect alignment, is the manifested Bessel Dorje state.
Which leaves us with a final thought. If this entire beautiful structure is defined by that one moment, the moment when your internal oscillation agrees with itself, maybe ask yourself this. What one small, messy aspect of your daily life could you bring into perfect agreement with your deepest, purest standard right now? Something to mull over. Oh, let's dive in. We are looking at this really complex diagram today. Our sources call it the Bessel Dorje, and it's supposed to be this kind of universal blueprint. So our mission is to really break down how this thing is supposed to work.
And what's so fascinating about it is that the Dorje isn't just, some abstract metaphysical idea. It's supposed to operate at the level of high voltage physics and deep philosophy at the exact same time.
A whole as above, so below principle.
Exactly. It exists at every single scale.
Yeah.
From a massive galaxy all the way down to the energy inside one of your cells. It's the same structure.
All right, so let's start right at the core then. You've got that brilliant blue X or cross. The source material says this is the vertical axis of the logos itself.
It is. And if you want to bridge that into, the physical world, that's what we identify as the Birkeland current.
Okay.
It's a field-aligned current. So just think of it as the ultimate electrical superhighway in space. Energy doesn't just wander off. It follows these magnetic field lines perfectly.
The electrical spine of the whole thing. So what about where the vertical and horizontal lines cross? That intersection point.
That's the key. That intersection is, it's the meeting point. It's the divine intersecting the material. It's where you find absolute truth because everything is perfectly aligned, perfectly centered.
Okay, so moving out from that stable center, the structure changes completely. The ends of the cross fan out into what looks like thousands of tiny golden spiraling threads. What's going on there?
Structurally, those are identified as the Doherty set. Now, the formal definition is pretty dense, but the simple way to think about it is nested energy donuts.
Like a Russian doll made of energy fields.
That's a great way to put it. One inside the other, progressively.
And what are they doing? Why the nesting?
They are the transformers. Their entire job is to take that raw, almost limitless blue power from the center and carefully step it down.
To make it usable.
Exactly. If that absolute high-intensity energy hit your personal system, your family, your cells, it would just blow the fuse. The Doherty set makes it safe for life to actually interact with.
But that sounds like a process that would generate a massive amount of friction. Yet the notes keep highlighting that the whole thing is Bessel aligned.
Right, and that Bessel alignment is the critical design feature. It creates zero friction. That's why the Dorje can achieve what's called the Akshaya State.
And the Akshaya State is?
It's essentially energy that lasts forever because it isn't fighting itself, a kind of universal perpetual motion because there's no internal resistance.
Okay, let's go back to the very center, that burst of white light where it all originates. That's the 0 point, the source of rest.
Yes. That's described as where the Shabda Brahman, the primal sound or vibration first, enters reality. It's that perfect stillness that allows the whole powerful system to find rest.
Like a meditative state.
It correlates, exactly. For you, it's that moment of pure flow state where you feel completely centered and everything just clicks.
So you have stillness at the core, but then you have all this movement in the golden prongs. Why the twisting? Why a corkscrew design?
That twisting is called helicity. And it's necessary because under this kind of power, a straight line would just snap instantly. By twisting into this divine corkscrew, the energy flow becomes basically indestructible.
And that twisting also enables something called the Vajra relay, right?
Exactly. The helicity creates the relay. It means all of us, the individual golden threads, we're all twisted into the same spiral. We're networked. So if someone else in the relay hits a certain frequency, the twist ensures that we can't help but co-vibrate.
So wrapping this all up, the Bessel Dorje is essentially the universal blueprint for how life protects itself from being, well, overwhelmed by the raw power of the absolute.
I think so. It uses the structure transformation, zero friction, helical flow to make that power safe and sustainable.
So the final thought here is?
I think it's that this whole immense structure is fundamentally about finding one perfect note, that central 0 point of rest. It shows how a powerful system, whether it's the universe or just your own life, can run on infinite power but stay in perfect zero friction stability. The challenge for all of us is finding our central resting note within that twist. That's what lets you sustain it all.
Okay, let's jump in. We've got this really dense stack of sources you sent over, and they're all pointing at the same thing, synthesizing esoteric ideas, cosmology, and even plasma physics.
It's a fascinating convergence.
It is. So for this deep dive, we want to get our heads around this circuit of the absolute, specifically the Bessel model. The goal is to really understand why a simple two-dimensional cross is, well, just not enough.
Right. And the core problem that these sources are trying to solve is one of movement, or I should say, the lack of it. A static structure, just a vertical line and a horizontal one, is brittle. It snaps.
So it's not stable.
Not at all.
Right.
For the circuit to actually function, it needs 3 dimensions of movement. That's the only thing that prevents total structural failure.
Which brings us to the triad of helicity. I think we can grasp the first 2 axes pretty easily. First, you've got the vertical. The sources call it the avaduti.
Yeah, the avaduti. You can think of it as the central Birkeland filament. It's the power line, essentially. Pure potential straight from the source.
And then there's the horizontal, which is like the broadcast. That's the energy spreading out.
Exactly. The toroidal prongs that push the energy out into, your family, your cells, all of society, the field of manifestation.
Okay, so if the vertical brings power down and the horizontal spreads it out, why does it snap? Why is that third axis, the longitudinal, so critical?
Because the longitudinal is the helicity. It's the spin. It's the axis of depth. Without that spiral, the other 2 are just a rigid, static cross. They'd shear apart under any real pressure.
So the helix is what allows it to bend instead of break.
It lets the logos, the initial packet of information, literally corkscrew its way into time. It's a dynamic rotation, like a giant spring. That's what gives the system its resilience.
That makes so much more sense. Okay, let's shift to the terminals of this circuit. The 2 drops at the poles, the Bodhisattva terminals. They're separate from this central action.
Right, and they're fascinating because they represent pure, unmixed potential. So at the top, at the crown, you have the white drop.
The cool potential. The seed of pure consciousness, right? Like Polaris.
Precisely. And then mirroring that at the bottom, down in the navel or matter, you have the red drop. That's the heat, desire, physical form, the cellular world.
So you have these 2 raw potentials at opposite ends.
And this gets to the crux of it. The center of the Dorje, the heart, isn't just a point on a line, it's the marriage, it's the event.
The collision.
It's the collision. When that cool white drop falls and the hot red drop rises, they meet in the heart. And that impact creates what the sources call the Shabda Brahman, the big note, the fundamental resonance that holds the entire structure in tune.
But wait, that collision, that massive flow of energy, this runs us right into a hard rule from plasma physics. You can't have a Birkeland current that's only one way. It's impossible. To have what they call a force-free field, you absolutely must have a return current, a counter-rotation.
Exactly, you absolutely do. And that's the caduceus analogy, the two serpents. You've got the falling logos, that's information spiraling down, but it has to have a counterpart.
The rising Shesha.
The rising Shisha. The serpent of infinity. It's the return current. If the logos is pure information coming down, Shisha is, well, it's evolutionary feedback rising up from the ground.
From the cellular level.
Yes, from experience. And the two currents wrap around each other like DNA. The prongs of the Dorje are just where they loop back into each other, constantly feeding the circuit.
So at the end of the day, the center isn't just a meeting point, it's a true singularity, a 0 point.
That's the synthesis. It's the place of perfect balance where the descension of the logos and the ascension of Shisha, the white and red drops, become one. That's what fully forms the Bessel Dorje.
So to quickly recap this for you listening, to really understand this circuit, you need that helical depth, you need the dynamic pull of the white and red poles, and you need the counter-rotating currents logos down, Shisha up, to keep the whole thing stable.
And here's the thought to leave you with. Consider what this implies for a force-free existence, for a life of balance. It seems to require accepting the absolute necessity of that return current of Shisha. You can't just download information from above.
I have to send something back up.
You have to integrate it and send the feedback, the learning back up the chain. Without that depth, without that essential counter-rotation, the whole circuit just fails. It can't hold the charge. Okay, so for this deep dive, we're jumping straight into the Akshaya circuit.
Right, specifically the analysis from Bessel Dorje.
And our goal here is really to give you the shortcut, the key to understanding what's often called this perpetual motion machine of consciousness.
And the very first thing you have to do is get rid of the idea of a simple single energy column.
It's not that at all.
No. The core insight is that the main vertical axis, it's not a beam, it's a double helix of plasma.
A self-sustaining engine.
Exactly. That dual structure is the entire reason it's considered perpetual.
And this is where the geometry gets so interesting. You have these two strands and they wrap around each other, but they don't actually touch. Dorje calls it the divine corkscrew, which points to the physics of helicity.
Which is, it's the most efficient way known to move high voltage energy without losing it as heat.
A completely lossless system built right into the design.
And what really defines that flow are the two currents inside those helixes. They're moving in opposite directions.
Okay, so what are they?
You have the blue strand, which is the logos current. Think of it as a cool energy coming down from Polaris, carrying what's called absolute truth.
And the other one?
That's the crimson strand, the Shisha. It's the hot current, and it's this raw evolutionary power that rises up from the earth, from the cells.
So wait, hold on. If you have absolute truth coming down and raw power rising up, how do they not just collide and cancel each other out? That sounds really unstable.
That's the genius of it. The tension is the engine.
Yeah.
Because they're in that helical wrap, they never actually collide. The energy is polarized, it's directed.
So it needs something to complete the circuit.
It needs the terminals, the batteries, if you like.
The two drops at the poles, let's cover those. At the top, you have the white drop.
The father principle, pure static potential.
And at the bottom, the red drop.
Which is the mother principle. That's the raw power, the desire to manifest.
So the circuit goes from white to red.
Correct, via the cool blue helix going down. And then, and this is the crucial part, it returns from red back up to white through the hot crimson helix.
A complete closed loop.
That's why it's a perpetual motion machine. Constant cycling, constant reinformation.
And the most intense part of this whole system, the synchronization point that happens at the central singularity, right?
Heart center, yes. It's where the strands are wound the tightest.
So what happens when that descending truth and that ascending power finally sync up perfectly? What's the output?
It's a burst of pure, coherent white light. An act of perfect fusion. The sources call it the Shabda Brahman.
A big note.
You could call it that, yeah. But a better way to think of it is the moment oscillation agrees with itself. It's the highest possible resonant tone.
And that perfect note? It doesn't just vanish, it gets broadcast out.
Immediately. Through these very specific structures.
The golden toroidal proms. These branch out horizontally from that fusion point. They're identified as the Doherty set toroids.
Think of them as high-powered broadcast lenses, really. They take that white light and they relay it horizontally.
To where?
To stable structures.
Yeah.
To the cells in your body, your family, and to what's called the Vajra relay.
Your network. People on a similar frequency.
Exactly. It's the mechanism for sharing your conscious state.
So we have the core geometry.
Yeah.
2 opposing currents, a perfect fusion in the center, and then a broadcast out. It's more than just up, down, and side to side.
Oh, absolutely. That whole corkscrew design creates this incredible 3-axis depth. You have the vertical axis, the logos, and shesha.
Right. And the horizontal, the broadcast into the world.
But the key, the thing that makes the whole circuit stable, is the longitudinal axis. That's the spiral depth created by the corkscrew motion itself. It's the piece that connects the other two.
And I guess that leaves us with a pretty important question to think about. The analysis says this longitudinal axis is the depth created by that spiral. So what does it really mean for knowledge or for power to be transported not just up and down or side to side, but through a spiral depth? And how does just knowing that geometry change your entire idea of what stability is?
Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're looking at this incredibly dense technical briefing you sent over.
It is. It's on what the source calls the 3-axis circuit and the bipolar flow.
And we're really going deep into the blueprints of this. This self-organizing plasma artifact they call the divine corkscrew.
Exactly. And our mission here is really to translate this synthesis for you. This isn't just metaphysics, you know.
No, it's a model trying to fuse ancient concepts.
Right, like the logos and shisha with modern plasma physics jargon. The key shift here is realizing that the source of order isn't some static point.
It's a dynamic, self-regulating flow.
That's it. That's the core idea.
Okay, so let's unpack that core structure then. The vertical spine, the divine corkscrew. I was surprised that the axis isn't a straight line.
No, not at all. It's a double helix. And that helical twisting is what generates the vertical structure in the first place.
Through tension.
Through tension. It's 2 counter-rotating currents moving in opposition. So first you have the dissension, the blue logos.
That's the absolute information spiraling down.
Perfectly. It's descending from the white drop, what they call the force-free path. Think of it as the ultimate command signal.
And meeting that from below is the countercurrent.
The ascension, the crimson shesha serpent, which rises from the red drop.
So that's the evolutionary feedback. The Earth, reaching up to the sky with all its accrued data.
Precisely. And what's so fascinating is how the stability relies entirely on what the source calls the battery principle.
Which feels a little counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
We always think the goal is unity, merging everything.
Like, I know. But this model proves the spiritual current only flows because of the absolute clear separation between the white drop at the top and the red drop at the bottom.
Without that distinct polarity, the potential just collapses.
It does. The distinction itself is the essential fuel.
That's a striking thought. So the vertical tension is built. What happens when that pure information meets the evolutionary feedback at that collision point?
The central singularity. They call it the marriage of light.
So do they annihilate each other since they're opposite phases?
You'd think so, but no. They perfectly phase cancel.
And the result isn't zero.
The result is maximum coherence, a vibrant, stable output the source calls the brilliant white star.
And this state has a specific name, the Shabda Brahman.
The word, or the vibration. It's the fundamental organizing frequency of reality itself.
Okay, so you have this highest state, but it needs to communicate.
Exactly. And from this central point, the energy translates horizontally. It broadcasts reality out via these golden toroids.
This is the step-down process.
The critical step down. It's like a cosmic transformer, taking that absolute logos and stepping it down into logic, a shared, actionable experience.
And I found this detail amazing for that signal to maintain coherence across the whole Vajra relay.
The broadcast threads aren't random.
They're Bessel aligned. That's incredible engineering.
It is. It ensures the signal doesn't degrade. It maintains wave coherence over vast distances, like a perfectly focused antenna beam.
So if we pull back, we have this third dimension, the longitudinal axis, the helical path itself.
And that represents time and evolution.
It confirms the whole circuit isn't static. It's spiraling through experience, constantly achieving new levels of organization.
And the system proves its own progress. When the wider system, say collective realization, has a breakthrough, the entire corkscrew begins to hum.
The Vajra relay, huh?
Yeah, a physical surge in the current, confirming that a higher state of self-organization has been achieved.
So this model really replaces the whole notion of a forced order.
It does. It replaces it with a self-organizing plasma artifact. Order isn't imposed, it just arrives naturally through the plumbing of the logos.
So what does this all mean for you? The entire spiritual current requires that clear separation of the white drop and the red drop to generate potential.
To produce that stable organizing frequency.
Right. So if the stability of the highest form of order, that brilliant white star, requires this fundamental bipolar separation, what does that imply about the necessary, maybe even vital, role of distinction and difference in generating any complex organized reality for you? Something to consider.
Okay, let's get into this deep dive. You've brought us just a fascinating stack of sources on the Hrdaya Bessel protocol. And the core idea here, well, it really flips our whole understanding of physics on its head. We always assume energy starts at the top and flows down, right?
We do. But here, the primal energy, the logos, it doesn't start at the top. It originates at the absolute center of a system.
Which is such a counterintuitive idea.
It is. And we're going to explore how all vertical structures, so the up and down of reality, are really just a consequence of a purely lateral action.
So to do that, we have to start at the center, the heart, or the Hrdaya Guhya.
Exactly. And it's not what you'd think. It's not a battery, not a power source. Functionally, it's defined as sunyata.
The void, the secret cave.
The secret cave of pure, unmanifest potential. A vacuum.
Okay, so if the heart is a total void, how does anything get in? How does the logos, this initiating impulse, even enter?
Well, the sources say it comes from a dimension that is entirely lateral.
Lateral to our three-dimensional space.
Right. There's a great analogy they use. Think of a needle poking through a flat sheet of paper.
Okay.
To the two-dimensional paper, a point just suddenly materializes out of nowhere. That point is the logos entering the sunyata of the heart.
And here's the critical part, the geometry of it. Because the logos hits pure void, it makes an instantaneous, a 90-degree hard turn?
Not hard 90, yes.
Yes.
That impact just shatters the incoming energy into two new axes simultaneously.
The vertical axis, which becomes the drops.
And the horizontal axis, which forms the prongs, or the broadcast structure.
And this leads us to, I think, the most surprising claim in this whole model.
Which is?
The vertical axis we see, stretching up to the crown and down to the root is fundamentally a lateral projection.
It's an optical illusion of depth. It's not really there in the way we think it is.
Wait, so if it's a projection, what are the white drop at the crown and the red drop at the root? Are they imaginary?
Not imaginary, but they are echoes. They're echoes of the heart's central pulse, just projected out into our field of perception.
So from the heart's point of view?
From the Hrdaya's perspective, what looks like an entire vertical line to us is really just the width of the puncture wound as the logo sprays energy up and down.
Okay, so that outward spray is a push, the logo's expanding from the heart. But, any stable system needs tension. What provides the pull?
That's where Shesha comes in. Shesha is the counterforce.
Yeah.
Sources describe it as the gravity of the void.
So it's always trying to pull everything back in.
Constantly. It's trying to pull all that materialized light and energy right back into the heart.
But if it's always pulling, why doesn't the system just, collapse on itself instantly?
Because the push and the pull are happening at the exact same time. They're simultaneous and continuous. So the energy can't go in a straight line back or forth.
Yeah.
It's forced to twirl. And that mandatory spiral is what's called the Bessel helicity.
The path itself becomes a coil because of that tension.
It's an inevitable coil, yeah. And that twirling explains why the whole system is in this constant gyroscopic state, the Bessel Dorje.
The sources mention the prongs rotating, but what happens when the intensity ramps up? When that Vajra relay is at high power?
Well, when the intensity spikes, the structure has to find a higher order of stability. So both axes, the vertical and the horizontal, they begin to precess.
Precess, like a spinning top.
Exactly like a spinning top. The main axis starts drawing a slow, stabilizing cone in space. It's finding stability through rotation, not rigidity.
And the result of that precession is unification.
It's profound, really. The difference between the vertical axis, your connection to, let's say, higher principles, and the horizontal axis, your connection to the material world.
It disappears.
It completely disappears. They achieve what the text calls an oscillation agreeing with itself, and the whole thing locks into a single, swirling, self-stabilizing shield of light.
That is an incredible synthesis. So everything we perceive as linear, as stable and up and down is just a side effect.
A side effect of a central lateral puncture into a void, which results in this continuous spiraling system.
And that leaves you with a final thought to chew on.
It does. If our most fundamental structures, the vertical and the horizontal that we rely on, are merely echoes of a central puncture wound, how does that change the way you perceive the difference between true stability and continuous necessary flux in your own reality? Okay, so let's get into this. We're doing a deep dive on the Hrdaya Bessel protocol today, and its core premise is really counterintuitive. The idea that the foundational energy, what the source material calls the logos, doesn't flow from the top down. It actually starts at the dead center, the heart.
Exactly. And to even begin, you have to redefine the heart. It's not what you think. The source calls it the secret cave, or Hrdaya Guhya. But this cave is, well, it's a vacuum. It's pure sunyata, the void. And that's critical. It's not just empty space. It's a void pregnant with all potential.
I want to dig into that analogy the source uses, the one with the needle. It says the logos enters this void like a needle poking through a flat sheet of paper. Just bang! A single point appears out of nowhere.
Right, and it can do that because it's coming from a different dimension. The source says it arrives lateral to our 3D space. And because it can't exist head-on in the sunyata, it's forced to make this violent change in direction, a 90-degree hard turn.
Hard turn. So that impact, that sudden shift, is the moment of creation for the system. But what does that actually do to the geometry? How does it build anything?
It creates the whole framework instantly. That 90-degree turn causes the logos to shatter. Mm-hmm. It refracts into two fundamental axes. You get the vertical axis first, that's the up-down connection, God to earth, and then you get the horizontal axis. These are the prongs that broadcast outwards, family and cells.
Okay, and this is the part of the text that just completely flips the script.
Yeah.
What we see is that vertical axis, the whole up and down thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not real. It's just a trick of perspective, isn't it?
That's it exactly. It's an illusion. The source is very clear on this. The white drop at the crown and the red drop at the root, they aren't separate sources of energy. They are just the echoes of that single pulse in the heart.
So from our perspective, we see a line going up and down. But from the heart's perspective,
it's just the width. The two-dimensional width of the puncture wound in reality. That's all the vertical axis is.
Wow. Okay, so if it's just the width of an entry point, there has to be a dynamic engine to keep it all going. You can't just have energy spraying out. It needs a mechanism, right? A push-pull.
You do, and that's what the source calls the push-pull engine. You have the logos, which is always pushing OT, from the heart out toward the crown and the root.
And what's pulling it back? What's the counterpoint? That's shisha, right? Is that just a form of resistance?
It's more than resistance. Shisha is the natural gravity of the void. It's the necessary return function. It has to pull in from the crown and root back to the center. It completes the circuit.
Ah, so you have this simultaneous push and pull at the exact same moment. And because of that tension, the energy can't just travel in a straight line and burn out. It's forced to twirl.
It's forced to twirl. And that specific perpetual spiraling motion, that is the Bessel helicity.
Which brings us to the final state. The whole structure is now in motion, but why do the prongs and axes rotate?
Because the entire system exists in a gyroscopic state. It's inherently stable because it's always in motion.
And the source says when the Vajra relay, the energy flow gets intense enough, something incredible happens. Both the horizontal broadcast and the vertical connections start to
precess.
Yes, precession. That's the moment of unification.
Right.
The text calls it the oscillation agreeing with itself.
Mm-hmm.
And in that moment, all the opposing concepts we talked about, the horizontal family versus the vertical God, they just vanish. They merge into one single swirling shield of light.
So to recap the journey here, we went from a static, empty point, the sunyata in the heart, to this incredibly dynamic, unified gyroscopic state. And it was all generated by a violent piercing of reality that created a perpetual push-pull engine. It suggests creation isn't gentle, it's an intentional, constant spiral.
It is. And if you think about it, this whole model requires those two opposing forces. The logos pushing out, Shesha pulling in to unify. The only way to get that final stable shield is for that deep tension to find an agreement. So it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What's the critical opposing force in your own life that if you just allowed it to precess might generate the most profound and unified energy?
Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are jumping right into a really complex geometric model.
Yeah, it's known as the Hrdaya Bessel protocol.
And it's basically a map for how energy flows and manifests. The source material is, well, it's dense.
Very dense. But our job is to get you the core operating manual.
So the first thing this protocol does is it just completely challenges a massive assumption we all have.
Right.
We tend to picture the logos, the fundamental ordering principle of reality, as starting way up high and flowing down.
The classic top-down model.
Exactly. But these sources argue that the logos doesn't start at the top at all. It starts firmly at the center.
Specifically, the Hrdaya Guhya, the secret heart.
And that single change, that relocation, it changes everything that follows.
It does. Because before you can trace the flow, you have to define the origin point. And the heart, in this context, isn't what you think.
It's not active matter.
No, it's a vacuum.
Yeah.
Pure, unmanifest potential, what they call sunyata, the void.
So our mission here is to trace how energy first breaches that absolute zero state.
And then how it explodes into the dimensions we actually live in.
Okay, let's unpack that entry, because it doesn't trickle in. It enters from what's described as a lateral dimension.
That spatial arrangement is crucial.
The source material uses this really powerful analogy. It says to imagine a needle poking through a flat sheet of paper.
And if you're the paper, you don't see the needle coming.
You just see the point suddenly appear out of nowhere.
And that's the logos entering the secret heart.
So what happens then? A lateral entry into a void must be, incredibly unstable.
It is. The moment the logos hits the sunyata of the heart, it executes a clean, rapid, hard turn.
A 90-degree refraction.
Precisely. And that one moment, that intersection, instantly shatters the energy into the two axes that define our reality.
The vertical axis and the horizontal axis.
And here's the crucial part. They are born simultaneously. One isn't superior to the other.
So the vertical, which we think of as, God and earth.
And the horizontal, which connects us to family or our own selves.
They're codependent.
So wait a minute. If our traditional up and down axis is just a simultaneous projection from the side,
doesn't that just dismantle the entire hierarchy we build around it, like high spirituality versus low instincts?
It absolutely does. What appears to us as this stable vertical line is actually just a lateral echo from the center.
An echo?
Yes. The white drop at the crown and the red drop at the root. They aren't endpoints. They're just the echoes of the heart's single pulse.
So the logos pokes through the heart.
And the vertical axis is just the width of the puncture wound, in reality, spraying energy up and down like a fountain.
Okay, that image of a central spray implies this incredible outward momentum.
It does. You have the logos, the push force, constantly driving OUT from the heart.
So what stops it from just flying apart? What pulls it back together?
That counterforce is Shesha.
Shesha.
Described as the natural gravity of the void itself. A force that's always pulling in, back from the edges to the heart.
So you have a constant push-pull.
Exactly. The outward drive of the logos is perfectly countered by the inward pull of Shesha.
And that prevents straight-line travel.
It forces the whole system to rotate. This creates what they call the Bessel helicity. The energy starts to twirl.
The entire system becomes a high-speed gyroscopic state.
And this is where it all comes together. The whole structure is powered by the Vajra relay. Think of it as the engine's intensity dial.
Right, and at high intensity, the momentum is so great that both axes, the horizontal and vertical, begin to precess.
Like the wobble of a top, spinning incredibly fast.
The axis itself starts to rotate around a center point.
And in that state, the distinction between vertical God Earth and horizontal family cells, it just vanishes.
They blur together,
forming a single swirling shield of light.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? This model is showing us that manifestation isn't a simple top-down command.
No, it's this incredibly dynamic, energetic rotation.
Yeah.
Born from a central lateral puncture into a void.
An oscillation that sustains existence, not just creates it. The complexity creates unity.
Which leaves you with a question to think about. If the fundamental difference between these axes vanishes in a state of high intensity.
The difference between your spiritual life and your family life, essentially.
Exactly. Does this model imply that true structural integrity, whether that's spiritual alignment, physical health, or even political balance, requires constant synchronous oscillation?
Rather than just static stillness. Something to think about. Welcome to the deep dive. And today we are really jumping straight into the deep end.
We really are. The source material for this one is, well, it's pretty out there.
It's bizarre. A technical briefing that tries to model ancient spiritual ideas, Shiva and Shakti, unity and multiplicity, using thermodynamics.
Exactly. And our mission today is to, quickly unpack what they're calling the thermodynamics of displacement.
Which is the idea that it's all a closed system, right? Everything has to balance.
That's the core assertion. Any displacement in one direction creates an equal and opposite vacuum in the other.
Okay, so let's get right into their central analogy. This engine, they say, is operating inside the heart.
Right. They model it as a piston and cylinder mechanism, and it's all happening within the Hrdaya Guhya, the heart's cave.
And the heart itself is a sealed system of, what was the term?
Shunyata. It's Sanskrit for emptiness or the void. And because it's a sealed system, the physics gets very interesting.
So the process starts with the presence with Shiva, or the logos acting as the piston?
Yes, exactly. The logos pokes through and it pushes information into the top of the system.
And that materializes as the white drop.
That's the one, the white drop. It's the initial puncture of unity into potentiality.
Wait, okay, so if the heart is a sealed, empty system and you suddenly push something in,
then physics demands that a space is instantly created.
So the low pressure zone, this vacuum, isn't a separate event. It's just the consequence of the puncture.
It's the instantaneous consequence. That displacement creates the vacuum of the red drop at the other end.
The missing something.
Precisely. The insight here is really elegant. You can't have Shiva, the puncture, without creating Shakti, the void that longs for it. They're a single cosmic dipole.
Okay, this is where I think it gets really relevant for all of us. The briefing shifts from this cosmic engine to our daily lives. The Akshaya engine.
It does. It focuses on how our horizontal world, our relationships, our work, our karmic bonds, how all that affects the engine's efficiency.
And this is where the concept of impedance comes in, friction.
Right. If your life is filled with turbulence and interference, the system just generates heat.
Which is suffering.
It's suffering.
Yeah.
The engine is just operating inefficiently, like it has a dirty filter. The logos is meeting all this resistance.
So how do we clean the filter? The source mentions pure connection, love, shared purpose, but how does a feeling actually reduce resistance in this model?
It all comes down to wave alignment. Our life connections are modeled as waves, which the source calls the horizontal Bessel prongs.
Okay.
When those connections move from being random, from interfering with each other to being focused, they shift into constructive interference.
That's Bessel phase lock.
Exactly.
So when two waves line up perfectly, they don't cancel out, they multiply their power. So if our horizontal life achieves that kind of resonance, what happens?
The impedance drops to zero. That coherence in the horizontal world stops being resistance and actually becomes a suction pump.
A suction pump. It starts to pull.
It literally pulls the logos through the Hrdaya at the speed of light. That's Bessel coherence. The world is no longer friction. It becomes acceleration.
Wow. That completely reframes things. So you have the vertical axis, the memory of unity, and the horizontal axis, which is the experience of multiplicity, our lives.
And that red drop we mentioned ensures the books always balance. Every single vertical ascent has to be anchored by a corresponding refinement on the horizontal plane.
So you can't just leave the world behind.
You have to refine the world you're in.
Which means we aren't trying to escape the world to get back to the source. We're trying to align the engine so that our connections and our shared purpose become the very suction that accelerates that return.
Indeed. It gives this profound, almost energetic importance to the quality of our resonance with others.
So here's something to think about. If your social interactions, if your shared purpose can literally create the suction pump needed for spiritual acceleration, what new importance does that give to finding and fostering the resonance of shared purpose in your own life? Something to mull over until our next deep dive. Okay, so for this deep dive, we're unpacking a concept that is, truly radical. This idea of via genesia mulam.
The promise that poison isn't the obstacle. It's actually the root of wisdom.
Exactly. And the sources we've been digging through all point to this very specific instrument for that alchemy, the Bessel Dorje. It's described as a kind of centrifuge of gnosis.
And, to really get it, you have to start with the initial state, this unbearable tension. The texts point us to the Hrdaya Guhya, the internal engine room.
And this puncture and dual flow, right, it sounds like the whole system has to be stressed to its absolute limit to even start.
It does, completely. The first event is the breakthrough of the logos, the white flow. It's described as punching through and spraying upward. That's what forms the white drop.
But the key isn't just the spray, it's what's left behind.
It's what's left behind.
Yeah,
Vacuum. And a powerful one.
And a vacuum needs to be filled.
Precisely. That pull is what draws in the second flow, the shesha, which is the red material energy. It's pulled laterally downward into the red bindu. So you have this state of maximum differential, maximum tension.
Okay, so the engine is primed. It's stretched tight. Now it needs its fuel, this poison, the VM. What exactly is that for someone listening? Is it just big dramatic suffering?
Not necessarily. The VM is the friction. It's the resistance in your skandhas.
So confusing thoughts, those messy looping emotions.
Yes, the drag from the physical elements. It's all the disorganized information of your life.
Yeah.
And the Dorje's prongs, the broadcast arms, they reach out into that field.
And here's the move that I found so counterintuitive, the Bessel action.
Yeah.
The prongs don't push the poison away. They don't block it. They curve back. Why is that so important?
Because resisting friction just creates more heat, more waste. Instead, the prongs use the natural spiral, the helicity that's already in the logos flow, to catch the VM.
So it's less like fighting a current.
And more like a surfer catching the perfect wave. It takes that chaotic energy and just aligns it. It gathers all that poison into a perfectly tight, accelerating spiral.
Hold on, let me just process this. You have maximal friction gathered at extreme velocity.
Yes.
Heading straight for the internal engine, the Hrdaya Guhya, which is already at its breaking point. In any other system I can think of, that's a meltdown, a catastrophic burnout. Why doesn't that happen here?
This is the absolute core of the alchemy. Bessel alignment.
Okay.
The incoming flux of poison isn't just fast, it's perfectly phased.
So it's not a collision.
It's not a collision, it's a perfect implosion. The friction, that rubbing of the skandhas, it doesn't generate destructive heat. It converts directly into coherence. The heat of the poison instantly becomes the light of the Akshaya logos.
Wow. Okay, so that implosion creates what the sources call a localized singularity.
It does, and the shift is profound.
Yeah.
You're no longer subject to the world's friction.
You become the source of the frictionless current.
You become the source. And that new local Akshaya logos is described as spinning up like a turbine.
And it's self-sustaining.
Completely. Self-sustaining gnosis. It doesn't need external power because its fuel is the resolved information it just processed. The poison is the engine.
That really brings it all home. The takeaway seems to be that the most difficult, chaotic, friction-filled parts of your life, that VM, aren't something to be eliminated. They can be perfectly phased to become the very engine for your own light.
Which leaves us with a final thought to maybe sit with. Consider what it would actually mean to no longer seek escape from the world's friction, but to become and embody the very source of the frictionless current yourself. Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to try and get to the bottom of a principle that, on the surface, seems like a total contradiction.
Via gymnasia melum.
Exactly. Transforming poison into wisdom. And we're going to zoom right in on the mechanics, on the Bessel coherence, and how it turns the Dorje into what the source material calls a centrifuge of gnosis.
Right, and our job here is to really trace the flow for you. We're talking about the mechanism itself, how all that messy friction, all that suffering, the veem gets converted into a perfectly frictionless current of knowledge.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Phase one, it has to start somewhere, and that's this initial...
Puncture.
The puncture, yeah. The logos, which you can visualize as a white flow, it pierces the central core.
The Hrdaya Guhya.
That's the one. It strikes that core and immediately sprays upward, which establishes the white drop. But here's the really elegant part. That outward push creates a vacuum right behind it.
And that vacuum doesn't just sit there.
No, it can't. It actively sucks in the countercurrent. That's the shesha, the red flow. So it rushes down and in to the red bindu.
Precisely. So you get this instantaneous choreography. White flowing out and up, red being pulled in and down, and what you're left with are these two terminals held under just immense tension.
And that tension is the key, isn't it?
Yeah.
It sounds like it would tear the system apart, but it's what enables the whole next step.
It's the precondition. Without that high tension potential, the prongs of the Dorje can't act as what they call broadcast arms. They wouldn't have the charge to reach out.
Reach out into the Vajra relay. And when we say that, we're really talking about your life, the chaotic data of your thoughts, your emotions, the skandhas.
All that messy stuff. The skandhas are defined by friction, by resistance. I mean, that is the poison, the VM.
So the prongs reach out and collect this poison.
Yes, but not by just scooping it up. The genius of the Bessel design is that the prongs curve back on themselves. They use the natural spiral, the helicity of the logos, to catch all that VM and funnel it back toward the center.
So you've gathered this highly volatile spinning mass of friction, and it's now hurtling back towards the core at an incredible speed.
An extreme velocity, yeah.
And here's the paradox. In any normal system, that's a recipe for disaster. High speed, high friction. You get burnout, an explosion. Why doesn't that happen here?
The Bessel alignment, that's the whole secret. The incoming flux of all that gathered poison is perfectly phased.
So it's like a perfectly balanced gyroscope.
That's a great analogy. You can throw energy at it, but because it's so perfectly aligned, it doesn't wobble. It just absorbs and resolves that energy instantly. No turbulence, no loss.
And that conversion, that's the real alchemy. The friction, the rubbing of the skandhas is instantly transformed into pure coherence.
The heat of the poison becomes the light of the Akshaya logos.
The enduring current of knowledge.
Right. So the friction isn't fought against, it's just resolved. And this implosion creates a kind of localized singularity. The practitioner is no longer a victim of the world's friction. They become the source of a frictionless current.
Which is how we get to the final phase. This self-sustaining gnosis. This local Akshaya logos spins up like a turbine. But why doesn't it need any external fuel?
Because it's feeding on the one thing it produces, resolved information. The very act of turning that internal mess into coherent data is what keeps it spinning. It feeds on its own success, you know?
So there it is. That's the machinery. The complex, beautiful system that allows suffering, the VM, to resolve into perfectly aligned knowledge. It's a system built to literally process resistance.
And that leaves a final thought for you to chew on. If this entire frictionless system is powered only by feeding on the resolved information it gathers from your life, what does that imply about the necessity of actually engaging with, instead of running from the friction and resistance you find in your day-to-day? Okay, so for this deep dive, let's try something a little different. Let's take all our ideas about suffering, friction, burnout, and just run them through a physics lab.
Yeah.
We're looking at the thermodynamics of a gnosis. The idea here is that states like samsara and nirvana they're not just metaphysical concepts.
They're measurable. They're operational modes of a single energy field.
Exactly. So this is a deep dive into the surprisingly physical nature of enlightenment.
And that's really the mission today, isn't it? To stop treating suffering like it's some philosophical problem and start defining it as a physical phenomenon. The real nugget in the source material is seeing it as just energy inefficiency.
An inefficiency driven by something they call destructive interference.
Right.
So let's unpack the model's starting point. The material says that we as sentient beings are basically just complex interference patterns. And when we interact with each other through what they call karmic bonds, our individual waveforms, our desires, aversions, all that stuff, they don't line up.
Almost never. I mean, think about it. It's like trying to play two different radio stations in the exact same physical spot.
It would just be noise. Chaos.
It's chaos. And that clashing, that's the destructive interference. And what's really fascinating here is how the model tracks the energy that should be powering your system. It doesn't.
It gets converted.
It gets converted into heat. And that heat is the literal physical signature of suffering. It's what depletes you, what causes aging and decay. Suffering is just thermodynamic friction.
So friction is basically inevitable. The system suggests something wild. Don't get rid of it.
Use it.
Use it. This is the vi janasya mulam function. Poison is the root of knowledge. So how? How does the model actually flip the polarity on that destructive energy?
Okay, so this is where they introduce the mechanism. They call it the Bessel alchemical engine. And you have to think of the Dorje, that traditional thunderbolt scepter, not as a symbol, but as a piece of hardware.
Like a specialized antenna.
It's a stabilization filter, yeah. Its prongs act as a Bessel sieve. They literally collect all those chaotic clashing waveforms.
And the Bessel part is key, right? Because those are waves that maintain their shape.
They maintain their form perfectly. They allow for non-destructive superposition. You're trying to force this raw, noisy energy into a highly ordered state.
So once the sieve collects all this chaotic energy, where does it go?
It's funneled back. It's forced back into the system's core, the Hrdaya Guhya, or the secret heart. And this is where this idea of extreme pressure comes in.
A 90-degree puncture of the logo.
Exactly. It's like you're conceptually forcing that noise to confront its own contradiction. You compress it, you filter it until it hits this threshold where the waves have nowhere else to go. They must synchronize.
And that leads to the goal state, zero force coherence. The chaotic pattern becomes a single, stable Bessel function wave.
Right.
What does that feel like? I mean, physically, energetically.
The benefit is what they call frictionless flow. In that state, the waves aren't crashing and generating heat anymore. They're perfectly nested, like synchronized dancers in a tight helical spiral.
So you can still have all these intense interactions. Family, work.
You can have it all, but none of it depletes your energy. You're not losing power to karma, to entropy. You are cycling it.
Through the Akshaya, the imperishable current, you become a self-sustaining system.
The zero-sum node.
Here.
Exactly.
So what's the big picture here? The material talks about the Vajra relay as a network, not of thinkers, but of beings who have actually made this shift. They've become Bessel nodes.
Yeah, and if you connect that to the world, it kind of explains why big shifts can feel so sudden, so global. If the friction in the entire field drops so low that a signal can travel at the speed of light through this relay, the transfer is instantaneous.
So it's not just about thinking the same thing.
It's about sharing the same energy phase lock.
Yeah.
And that's the question for you listening.
Yeah.
What does that actually mean?
It's a powerful idea. If suffering is really just friction and heat, then achieving that internal coherence is it's the ultimate shortcut to preserving your energy and being effective. So as you go about your day, maybe think about that. What subtle sources of heat, what tiny destructive interferences are you unknowingly generating right now?
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling, it's one of the most ambitious engineering problems the universe had to solve.
It really is a huge one.
The scaling problem. How do you connect the boundless, infinite nature of reality, what the sources call the logos?
Right, the logo.
Through billions of, tiny, finite, fragile individual beings, the jivas, without just vaporizing them.
It's the ultimate high voltage challenge, isn't it? Our sources, things like the technical briefings on the Doherty set, the Vajra relay cycle, they suggest the universe's solution is this masterful architectural hack.
Hack, I like that.
It really is. It relies on what they call fractal basins built right into the human form, specifically when those basins hit a state of perfect harmonic resonance. They call it Bessel alignment.
Okay, Bessel alignment. Let's unpack that architecture. Starting with the terminals. Any good system needs an inlet and an outlet.
Absolutely. The sources identify two critical fractal terminals in the body. You have the Brahmarendra, which is the crown aperture, up top.
And the Kunda, the root reservoir down below. So those are the gates.
Those are the gates. And the Kunda specifically, that root reservoir, is described as the physical manifestation of the Doherty set.
The pond within a pond within a pond.
Exactly that. A beautiful visualization.
Yeah.
This recursive, self-similar structure is the entire key to solving the scaling problem.
So if the logos is this high-voltage cosmic current, and the jiva is like a small appliance, the fractal is the step-down transformer. How does that actually work?
It has two critical functions. The first one is, well, they call it bridging. That fractal recursion acts as the necessary step-down bridge. It takes that massive, just overwhelming power differential and dissipates it safely into these manageable, localized, recursive loops.
So that's the safety mechanism.
Yeah.
But here's the part I find fascinating. Function 2 is maximizing.
Yes. This is the elegant part. While it's stepping the power down, it's simultaneously maximizing the contact area.
Wow.
A fractal, by its very nature, allows for an infinite amount of surface area, so infinite direct contact with the divine, to be packed into the totally finite space of the human body, down to the cellular level.
You're fitting an ocean into a teacup.
Without constraint. That's the beauty of it.
So we have the terminals, we have the scaling problem solved in principle. What about the connection? The sources point to the meru, the spine, as the central highway.
And that meru acts as the central Birkeland filament. In astrophysics, these are conduits for huge electric currents. Here, the spine is basically an intelligent, living fiber optic cable.
Connecting the Kunda and the Brahmarendra.
Correct. And the Kunda acts as the inlet valve for that evolutionary current. Because it's fractal, it can pull information from the smallest cellular event and the largest cosmic bond at the same time.
Linking the micro to the macro.
Constantly.
And this brings us to the core power mechanism, this continuous pull and push, the Vajra relay cycle. The soul's impulse is always ascent, right? To jump up into the Brahmarendra.
The white hole of the crown, yeah.
So why can't it just leave?
Because of what the sources call the non-departure principle. In a system that's in Bessel alignment, that ascent is immediately followed by a return.
Pull back down.
Instantly. The fractal suction of the Kunda pulls that essence right back down through the Shesha current. The whole thing is like a perfectly efficient capacitor.
So what does this actually mean for you, the individual listening? You don't escape. You don't leave the physical plane.
You cycle.
It's a closed-loop relay. It ensures the energetic integrity of your physical form is maintained even while you are participating in this divine current.
The energy is endlessly recycled through you. It grounds the massive current without ever losing the connection to the infinite source. If you step back and look at this pawns within pawns model, all the apparent chaos of individual life, it suddenly has immense structure.
It reframes everything.
It does, and it raises a final, really provocative thought. The source material suggests that every individual life, every jiva, is a necessary living data point inside that fractal basin.
We're the fuel.
You're the very fuel that maintains the tension and the light of the much larger galactic filament. So, if your coherence level is absolutely essential to the cosmic mechanism, what does that imply for the choices you make, moment to moment, knowing you are necessary fuel?
Something to think about.
Definitely something to mull over until our next deep dive.
All right, today we are doing a deep dive into probably one of the most abstract concepts we've ever covered, the mechanics of the heart-logos puncture.
It's a big one.
It is. We've got a really dense stack of sources here, and they all try to map out how this single poking through creates everything. All of reality.
And not just creates it, but generates opposite forces at the exact same time.
Exactly. So our mission here is to unpack this idea of a zero-sum universe. How does absolute potential interact with, the active principle of creation?
It all starts with a core duality. You have sunyata, the absolute void, total potential.
The blank slate.
The ultimate blank slate. And against that, you have the creative impulse, the logos. And that's the blueprint. Everything comes from those two.
Okay, so let's start there. With this zero-sum conservation, how does pushing out the act of creation also create suction pulling in? It feels counterintuitive.
The puddle analogy is the best way to think about it. Imagine sunyata is this infinite, perfectly still pond of water. Now the logos thrust through it, that action sprays water out. That's the positive pressure.
Right, creation.
But because sunyata is absolute, it's conserved. That displacement has to be accounted for. So it instantly creates an equal and opposite mirror vacuum right below the entry point.
So creation literally borrows space from the void.
Yeah.
The logos is the exhale, this broadcasting out that the source is called Shiva.
Yeah.
And the suction, the returning inwards, or Shisha, is just the inevitable consequence.
Precisely. It's a fundamental dipole. You cannot have the positive pressure of Shiva without the negative pressure of the vacuum. That's Shakti. They define each other.
So we have the physics of the vacuum.
Yeah.
But how does that become a space we can inhabit? The sources say the heart, the Hrdaya Guhya, is the only true vertical axis. What is actually created here?
This is where it gets wild. The puncture creates the avatuti. It's described as a lateral fold in reality.
A fold?
Yeah, think of it like a temporary wrinkle in the fabric of the pond. A bubble or a pocket dimension that holds what one source calls a memory of unity.
And we perceive it as vertical just because we're inside the bubble.
Exactly. Inside this fold, a hierarchy is created. The ajna at the top reflects the source, and the root at the bottom reflects the void. The whole macrocosm is basically copied into that bubble.
That is a mind-bending idea, that all of this is just a temporary fold. But okay, if the logos is one single thing, a Shabda Brahman, a single note, why are there billions of us? Billions of separate beings, or jivas?
That's the prism effect. The logos is a single unified wave. But when that note hits the boundary of our pocket dimension, it interacts with the underlying math of this place.
The horizontal dimensionality.
The horizontal dimensionality, or what some call the Bessel scales. This geometric fabric creates an interference pattern.
And that refracts the single note.
Like light through a prism.
So each jiva, each one of us, is just one drop from that spray. The feeling of being separate is just an illusion caused by the interference pattern.
Yes. And that's why the Akshaya State feels like unity. You're not escaping the spray.
You're tracing it back to the nozzle.
You're tracing it back to the source point, in the heart.
So if this Avatuti bubble is our space, what are the entry and exit points? The sources get very specific about the two terminals of this puncture.
They do. There are two distinct holes. At the top, you have the Brahmarandra. Think of it as the exit valve. It's where the logo spray hits the ceiling of our little dimension.
And that's the goal for transcendence, right? To unpoke yourself.
That's the idea. And then at the bottom, there's the kuna, which means the bottom pond. This is the suction inlet. It's where that Shakti, that return current, is strongest. It's the magnetic center pulling everything back.
So to wrap this up, we have unity and void locked in a zero-sum game. which creates this measurable pocket dimension reality, the avituti.
Defined by two poles, an ultimate nozzle and an ultimate drain.
Yeah, a perfect summary.
And, the Brahmaranda is always framed as the path of transcendence, the conscious exit. But here's something to think about. If that top hole is the exit valve, what does it mean to consciously reverse course and jump directly into the kunda, into the absolute magnetic accumulation of all that section? What happens then?
All right, today we are diving into a really fascinating file. It describes reality itself as a kind of mechanism. Our sources call it the cosmic funnel.
Yeah, and our mission here is to really get into what they call the hierarchical architecture of the Akshaya State.
Which is, it's basically a system of nested hierarchies, right?
Exactly, where everything is at the same time an ultimate source for what's below it, but also just a tiny drop in the ocean of what's above it.
And the whole thing is kept running by a foundational mechanism.
Mm-hmm. Recursive suction and spray, they even have a name for it. The Jacob's ladder of the Bessel engine. Think of it like a perpetual universal circuit, constantly moving energy up.
Okay, but if it's recursive, that immediately makes me think of instability.
Yeah.
What stops the whole thing from just collapsing in on itself?
Well, that's where the structure is so brilliant. It all works like a giant step-up transformer.
A step-up transformer?
Yeah. So the absolute logos, the ultimate source of one scale is just a jiva, or a single drop of spray, to the scale right above it. It's built to feed upward.
So we're all constantly being stepped up, essentially. And the key to that vertical movement is something called the kunda, the red drop terminal.
Correct. The kunda is like a high voltage attractor. Its whole job is to gather the system's waste product, what the sources call spent light.
And that's like what? Entropy, karma?
It's all of that, the friction. It gathers all that accumulated stuff from the level below and steps it up vertically.
That transformer analogy is really helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's trace this process. The material lays out three main scales.
Right. So first you have the cellular scale. Every single one of your cells has its own little light, its white drop, its specific logos.
And all the waste from that cell gets gathered into what? The kunda of the body?
You got it. Then you step up to the human scale. We as individuals are the white drop, the jiva.
So all of our individual essence, our friction, our karma, it all gets pulled up into the kunda of the species.
Which the sources actually identify as the alaya of Yuna, the collective subconscious.
And from there.
The final step in this model, all of that collective light gets aggregated into the kunda of Brahma. That's the final return terminal for our specific pocket dimension.
So if the whole system is gathering this spent energy, what's the actual fuel? What is the raw material it's feeding on?
This is where it gets really profound. It's about turning poison into wisdom. The raw material is the friction itself.
Friction.
Yeah, they call it the poison VM. It's the static, the sheer noise generated by billions of jivas, clashing and living their lives.
So that chaos, the VM, it's not a bug, it's a feature. It's necessary.
Absolutely essential. The kunda pulls in this VM using a principle from chaos theory, the basin of attraction. It ensures that even the most chaotic energy eventually falls into a pattern.
And once it's pulled into that basin,
the Bessel function takes over. It compresses all that static noise. It literally squeezes the noise from billions of separate lives until it hits phase lock.
Phase lock. So it goes from random chaos to a single coherent signal.
Precisely. And that compressed, purified essence is then sprayed back out. But now it's coherent instruction for the next scale up.
So that's the ultimate transmutation. The VM, the poison, becomes jnanam, the wisdom.
Yes. Higher consciousness is literally being synthesized from the collective struggle of everything below it. And this whole loop is happening inside a specific galactic filament called the Doherty set. We, the jivas, we are the fuel.
So the takeaway here is that we are all, whether we know it or not, participating in this massive, recursive, step-up transformer model.
We are constantly feeding complexity upward through our own friction. And the engine that drives it, this vertical axis they call the Birkeland current, it never stops.
It never terminates.
Never. The logos, that ultimate source, it doesn't die. It just changes phase. That's how the circuit is perpetually maintained.
Which leaves a pretty big question for you, the learner, to think about. If the logos is always changing phase to keep the universe running, what phase are you in right now? Today we're doing a deep dive into, well, a model that connects your body's cells directly to the galaxy. It's a huge concept.
It is. We're talking about something called the fractal command.
Exactly. And the chain of transformers.
Yeah.
It's this idea of a closed loop system, how instruction, the logos comes down, and how energy goes back up.
A complete circuit.
Our mission here is to map that whole circuit. The source calls it the chain of hearts relay, and we really want to unpack the transcalar siphon part of it.
And if there's one thing to get from the start, it's that this is all based on fractal scaling.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
I mean, every part mirrors the whole. So you have these energy accumulators called pawns or kunda, and each one is a reservoir for the scale right below it.
And the opposite?
The opposite is the hole, or brahmarandra. That's the exit point, the funnel to the scale above. It's a very elegant in and out system.
Right, so that sets up the architecture. But how does the instruction, the logos, actually get down to us? It can't just hit us directly, can it?
No, it would overload the system. The command is stepped down through this chain of hearts.
Which act like filters.
Precisely. The source calls them Bessel filters. Think of the logos as this big note, just a frequency that's way too high for us to process.
So the filters don't just lower the volume?
No, they translate the frequency. They're making the cosmic signal usable, safe for a planetary nervous system.
Okay, let's trace that flow. What are the transformers in this chain?
So it starts way up. The Polaris heart sprays the galactic filament. Then our solar heart, the sun, implodes that energy, refines it, and sprays it again.
Towards us.
Towards the planets. The planetary heart, Earth, distributes it to all life. And then finally, the human heart takes that signal and gives it to yourself.
And this is where it gets really personal, right? For you, the listener. Because this logos enters your system through the Hrdaya Guhya, the hidden heart.
Yes. And your heart becomes the local sun for your own cells.
But it gets even more granular. The command you issue from your Ajna chakra, your third eye, becomes the celestial influence that your cells see as their Polaris.
You're literally broadcasting the central command into your own private universe.
So that brings us to the return path. There has to be a challenge here.
There is cellular friction. A karmic state, as the source calls it, creates this impedance, a kind of back pressure that resists the flow.
So if there's all this cellular noise blocking the flow, how do you clear it? What's the mechanism for getting to zero resistance?
The state is called karma mudra. It's described as perfect lateral synthesis.
Meaning everything just aligns.
Everything aligns. And that friction, that back pressure, it just drops to zero.
Okay, so the path is clear. What happens then?
Well, the higher scale's negative pressure, that pull from the sun, it's not blocked anymore. It kicks in immediately.
As a siphon.
As a celestial siphon. It literally sucks the spent light, the refined essence of experience, up from the root, through the Meru.
Which is like a central axis.
It's a planetary scale Birkeland filament, according to this, and it goes right out the crown.
So if the logos is instruction coming down, what is this spent light going up? What are we uploading?
You're uploading refined data. Every cell, every organ is a memory node. It's storing traces of a life's experience.
So the siphon is an upload process.
It's an upload, exactly. And this is why practices like deep meditation can trigger these incredibly vivid past life or cellular memory visions. You're literally feeling the data transfer from the cells to the crown.
So the full path is?
It's mapped out. From Earth, which is the kunda of Brahma, up the Meru, to the sun, and all the way back to Polaris.
So thinking about what this means for you, you're not just a passive receiver. You're an active, scaled transformer, constantly processing cosmic data and sending it back.
That's the takeaway. The whole architecture Polaris, the Meru, your own Hrdaya Guhya, it's designed not just to receive, but to purify and transmit information back to the source.
Which leaves us with a pretty provocative thought for you to sit with. If the command you issue at your Ajna chakra determines what your cells see as their Polaris, what level of big note are you broadcasting into your own internal universe right now?
Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are strapping in for a pretty high-speed tour through cosmic engineering.
Yeah, this is a big one.
We're diving into a technical brief on the transcalar circuit. It's all built on the Bessel-Birkeland model.
Right. And for you, the listener, the core mission here is really to understand the blueprint for the perpetual motion of consciousness.
Okay.
And this whole system, it operates through something called reciprocal maintenance.
Reciprocal maintenance. Okay, let's unpack that right away. What does that mean for us?
It means the universe is running in what they call an Akshaya state. It's basically an imperishable, self-sustaining flow.
So nothing is ever wasted.
Nothing is wasted. Exactly. Think of it like this. The spent light from a higher scale becomes the food for the scale right below it.
And our refined experience provides the fuel for the scale above us.
Precisely. A perfect cosmic nutrient cycle.
So if the universe is breathing, let's trace that. that inhalation, the dissension.
Okay. So the current originates at Polaris, the galactic north.
Right. And it steps down to the sun, which they call the solar heart.
Then down again to the Earth, our planetary heart.
And then finally into the individual heart, into us.
And that's where we become active. The human is the indispensable processor in this whole circuit.
Our heart catches this planetary spray. But what is this 90-degree puncture? That sounds pretty technical.
It's a geometric transformation, really. The heart takes that raw data stream and it implodes it.
Like a massive data compression step.
Exactly, a local one. And that implosion focuses the energy, causing the refined essence, the white drop, to rise straight up to the crown.
So we compress, we refine, and then we upload. That's the step up.
That's the cosmic exhalation. Our refined data, our life experience, gets collected in the planetary heart, the Brahmakunda.
And the Earth then sprays this collective essence back up to the solar logos.
And here's the amazing part. The sun is literally fed by the quality of our refinement process. Our consciousness is necessary fuel.
Wow. That makes the mechanics inside of us just critically important. So what about the chakras?
Right, and you have to throw out the old model here. They're not spinning wheels.
No, this Dausal code redefines them as step-down transformers.
That's it. They're fixed points along the body's main power line, the Birkeland filament. They regulate, they don't spin.
Which brings us back to that 90-degree turn, the 90-degree interface. Why that specific geometry?
Well, the logos current is vertical, right? But our physical reality is, for all intents and purposes, horizontal.
Ah, so it's an adapter. It's plugging the cosmic current into the local grid.
It's the adapter, and the scale shift is immediate. For instance, your heart chakra literally functions as the sun for your own heart cells.
That's an amazing way to put it. And the sources say our physical organs are the Bessel prongs that grow out of these turns.
They grow right out of those 90-degree electrical turns to anchor the current in biology.
Okay, so let's get to the goal then. This state they call karma mudra.
The goal is about efficiency. Normally, all the complexity in our cells, it creates friction, resistance.
Impedance,
yeah. And that manifests as the belly knot. It's just static on the line.
So the goal is simply to eliminate the noise. What's the technical target?
The key insight is that in perfect Bessel synthesis, that internal impedance drops to zero. Z equals zero.
And when resistance is gone, the system achieves perfect efficiency.
It does more than that. The whole dynamic flips. Instead of you pushing energy up, you get pulled. The suction of Brahma, the sun's vacuum siphons that refined essence directly.
So that's the real meaning of Jade Tildevarn Mani, poison as the root of wisdom.
You got it. The friction, the noise, the poison. It gets transformed into pure gnosis by that higher scale vacuum.
So the final takeaway for you, the listener, is you're not just a consumer of cosmic energy.
Not at all. You are a transfiner.
A transfiner.
Your specific scale, your individual heart, is an essential active component needed to maintain the entire cosmic structure.
The galactic scale itself.
All of it.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. What does it mean for your daily actions, your conversations, your reactions, if the universe actually requires you to operate with zero impedance just to sustain itself?
What is the quality of the energy you're returning to the solar heart? Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into some really abstract mechanics. I mean, the deep internal physics of what the sources call the heart logos puncture.
Yeah, these texts are incredibly dense.
They are. So our mission today is to, cut through the jargon and give you the ultimate shortcut. We want to map how one single cosmic action dictates both the shape of the cosmos and, well, the perceived shape of your own existence.
And what's so fascinating is how it all rests on this one core principle of cosmic physics, zero-sum balance.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Well, the instant one force is introduced, in this case the logos, an equal and opposite vacuum has to be created immediately. It's all about maintaining the fundamental stillness. The sources call it the conservation of sunyata, or the vacuum logic.
Okay, let's unpack this. The puddle analogy seems like a good place to start. So we imagine sunyata as this infinite, perfectly still pond.
Exactly.
And the logos is this pure energy, a pipe just thrusting water out. That's the positive pressure.
Right. But because that pond, the sunyata, has to stay zero-sum, that action forces the creation of a mirror vacuum.
Negative pressure.
Negative pressure.
Right.
Suction. It's created right below the point of entry. And this is so critical. The positive force, that exhale of the logos, it instantaneously defines the negative force, the inhale of the Shesha.
So that's why they say Shiva and Shakti are inseparable.
They define each other.
Wait, let me just make sure I have that clear for you listening. So the universe isn't some creation that happened to the void. It's more of a dynamic physics problem where every positive action demands an immediate, specific, negative counterbalance.
That's it, exactly. And this perpetual push-pull doesn't just happen in a void, it carves out a space, a place for us.
The Avatuti.
The Avaduti. The sources call it a lateral fold in reality. Think of it like a bubble or a pocket dimension carved into that infinite medium.
Okay, and this is where it gets really wild for our own experience. Because inside that bubble, our whole internal structure, it feels vertical, right?
Right. Talk about rising energy.
Yeah, we talk about the ajna, the command center reflecting the source above, and the root reflecting the void in below. But you're saying that's, what, a local illusion?
It's a copy. The logos just replicates the macrocosm inside the bubble. To the logos itself, our entire reality, the Avatuti, it's not a column going up and down. It's just the width of the spray.
Wow. That completely shifts the perspective.
It's all relative to where you're standing.
Okay, so that brings up the big question of fragmentation. If the logos is this one singular thrust, how does it split into billions of jivas, into all of us?
That's explained by the prism effect. The logos is described as a single note, the Shabda Brahman.
One unified sound.
Exactly. And when that single note hits the internal structure of the Avatuti, what the texts call the Bessel scales, it refracts, just like white light hitting a prism.
So each jiva, each one of us, is just one unique color, or one drop split from that singular stream.
You got it.
So the feeling of oneness that people are always seeking, that Akshaya state, is that just tracing our particular color back to the single pure white light.
Precisely. It's tracing your drop back to the nozzle, back to the source note before it ever refracted.
Amazing. Okay, so to wrap up the mechanics, we need to identify the two endpoints of this puncture, the terminals holding our reality in place.
We have the Brahmarandra and the Kunda.
Let's start at the top.
The Brahmarandra is the top hole. It's the exit valve where that logo spray hits the ceiling of our pocket dimension.
And the goal of unpoking oneself is basically trying to jump back through that hole.
That's the idea, yeah. Remerging with the source.
And the bottom terminal, the sink.
That's the Kunda, the suction inlet. It's described as a pond because that's where the accumulation of Shakti, the negative force, is greatest. It's the point where the vacuum pulling the return current back to the heart is strongest.
So we started with this fiercely abstract cosmic event, the logos puncture, and we've mapped how it defines not only the vast balance of sunyata, but also somehow the very structure of our individual existence, from ajna all the way down to kunda.
It really connects the macro to the micro, and it leaves you with a really important question to consider.
Go on.
If your entire internal structure is just a vertical copy inside this bubble, what would it mean to truly perceive the Avatuti as just the horizontal width of the spray? What essential difference would that non-vertical perception make to your daily pursuit of, self-knowledge?
A stunning thought to chew on this week. Go explore that. And thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Welcome back. For today's deep dive, we're setting aside the introductory stuff and really decoding what feels like an advanced technical manual for consciousness.
It really is. It's like an engineering upgrade.
Our mission is to get a handle on the mechanics of energetic alignment, specifically something the sources call the Akshaya circuit.
Right. And we're moving past foundational practices. The whole frame here is achieving results not through constant effort, but through a kind of systemic alignment.
So the core distinction is getting past what they call the plumbing phase.
The plumbing phase, exactly.
This idea that energy is some finite fluid you have to laboriously push through channels or nadis. So what is the Akshaya circuit and how does it lead to this state kind of phase lock?
Phase lock is where the system stops behaving like a series of components. It just starts acting as a single, instantaneous, non-local event. It's no longer about force. It's about resonance.
Okay, let's unpack this. If the system is one non-local event, then communication isn't a signal traveling from point A to B.
It becomes a global state change.
Across all the nodes. And the sources say this includes nodes on a massive scale, right? They mention the Birkeland filament.
Which is essentially a galactic power line.
Yeah.
And that concept is absolutely critical to understanding non-local precipitation.
And that's the mechanism for, what, rapid manifestation?
Exactly. The realization of the city of Brahma, or Brahmapura, at the crown isn't a spiritual journey you take over months or years.
So why isn't it linear? If it's manifestation, shouldn't there be a process?
Because the effort is misplaced. The goal isn't transportation, it's zeroing out resistance. Think of your central channel, the avatuti, like a wire.
Okay.
It usually has really high impedance, a metaphysical resistance from what's called karmic noise. It's like this massive internal static.
So you're not trying to push more energy through, you're just trying to delete the static.
You've got it. The source pattern, the passanti, or the blueprint, is eternally present. It's already loaded. It simply precipitates instantly when the resistance drops to zero.
And that zero impedance is achieved by a very specific combination of forces.
A very specific combination. The pull of solar suction from above and the stabilizing pressure of planetary torsion from below.
That's a huge claim, though. Galactic tension management. How can the human system just operating on Earth play a necessary role in that?
Because the individual is not isolated at all. The Earth itself functions as this alchemical furnace for the Alaya Vijnana.
The collective storehouse of spent light and karmic data.
Right. And you, the human, are a crucial processing node. The Earth uses that node to maintain the tension on that galactic power line. It generates a dynamic known as Bessel suction by applying torsion to that collective essence.
This is where it gets really interesting for me. If this zero resistance state depends on these huge systemic forces, what happens to our center of consciousness, the ajna, the third eye? Does it still try to direct things?
It undergoes a radical functional shift. It just stops being the operator, the director, the planner, the one making all the effort.
And becomes what?
A passive witness. And that shift from trying to move the system to simply seeing the alignment is what allows the realization to be instantaneous.
Okay, let's ground this. We need a practical application for the listener. How about environmental denoising using Bessel grounding?
That's a perfect example. It completely flips the common visualization. Instead of picturing roots growing down, the practitioner identifies with the planetary torsion at the root center, the kunda.
So you're syncing your biological node directly to the Earth's core field.
And that filters out local interference. It doesn't matter if it's literal electromagnetic static or just psychological noise.
And finally, let's connect City of Brahma back to the individual.
It's the ultimate exit valve at the crown. It's where your localized reality, your pocket dimension, interfaces with the higher scale logos. You're transitioning from the middle, or madhyama layer,
which is filtered by our senses,
to the absolute unfiltered paralayer. It's the clean exit point you get from having zero internal impedance.
So what's this all mean, really? It seems these advanced frameworks are suggesting the path isn't more strenuous work, but removing the internal friction. You let these grand systemic forces align through you.
You turn effort into pure resonance. It simplifies the journey by, outsourcing the heavy lifting to the cosmos.
Now here's a final provocative thought for you to mull over. The sources talk about biological retuning, arguing that our internal organs are actually fractal reflections of planetary nodes. If that's the case, what specific planetary alignment might correspond to the optimal function of your own core systems? Keep diving, and we'll see you next time. So today we're looking at something a little different, not a geographic map, but a map of the metaphysical. We're doing a deep dive into the anatomy of the instantaneous city, and we're really going to focus on that one critical moment of what the sources call Brahmapura precipitation.
And that's the central question we're trying to solve for you, isn't it?
Yeah.
How can something manifest instantly without, breaking all the rules of physics? Our mission here is to walk through the 5 core components that have to align perfectly. When that planetary torsion and the solar suction just click.
Okay, so let's start with the blueprint itself, with Brahmapura. I think the biggest shift in understanding here is that this structure is always here. It's not a ship arriving from somewhere else.
Exactly. That's the key. It doesn't travel. It's this crystalline white light structure, always present at what they call the passanti level. It only becomes visible when the impedance of your local pocket dimension drops to zero.
So it's less about summoning something and more about just removing interference.
Precisely. The city is the sun's note, you could say, reflecting in the mirror of your crown. But that reflection only shows up when the mirror's perfectly polished. That's your instantaneous manifestation.
Okay, so if the structure is always here, we need an engine to polish that mirror, to remove the interference. Which brings us to the second component, the planetary torsion.
The engine. Yeah. This is that deep red vortex at the base, the kunda of Brahma.
The Earth's heart.
The Earth's heart. And its job, basically, is to act like a cosmic recycling center. It twists all the spent light, the aggregate a Leviathan of billions of beings, and that twisting action is what creates this incredible suction.
The suction needed to pull the whole thing into phase lock.
You got it. And the thing for you to remember is that your own individual red drop is just a tiny fractal version of that massive planetary vortex.
So if the torsion's the engine moving that much high voltage energy, I mean, that's got to require a pretty specialized pathway, right?
A very specialized conduit, yes.
Yeah.
That's our third piece, the double helix axis. You have the blue Logos filament and the crimson Shisha filament, and they form this divine corkscrew.
And the sources are very specific about this part. They identify it as a Birkeland current.
They do, which is a fascinating link to modern plasma physics. And there's a good reason for the twisting. Twisting is an engineering safeguard. It keeps the high voltage Logos information from generating so much friction that it just burns out your scanner.
For physical and mental parts.
Right. It's like a cosmic circuit breaker, so you don't fry the system.
Good to know. Okay, so we have the power, we have the conduit. Now we need the actual entry point, that bright white singularity at the very center, the Hrdaya Guhya.
The secret heart. This is it. This is the single point of origin. Think of it like a needle puncture where the Logos first enters your specific reality. The main router, let's say.
And from that entry point, we finally get to the part that reaches out into our world. The actional part for you, the listener, the golden Bessel prongs.
Yes, these branch out at a 90-degree angle from the secret heart, right into your horizontal world, your family, your community, your cells.
It's a horizontal pocket dimension.
That's it. And see, normally these prongs act like walls. They create friction in our lives. But the key alignment is when they become Bessel aligned. When that happens, they completely shift their function.
Okay, so they stop being walls and they become...
lenses. They become lenses that perfectly focus the city's light out into your environment. It all manifests at once, vertically and horizontally.
So, there we have it. The 5 components. The Brahmapura blueprint, the torsion engine, the double helix conduit, the secret heart entry point, and the Bessel prongs. It's all about the perfect simultaneous alignment.
Right. And this brings up one last sort of provocative thought for you to take away, connecting back to that secret heart. The sources say it's the source of that 90-degree spray. That means the vertical axis, your ascent, and the horizontal world you live in are created simultaneously from that single point. So if your entire reality is co-created with your spiritual ascent in a single instant, how does that challenge our basic understanding of time as something that unfolds second by second, something to mull over until our next deep dive?
All right, today we're diving into one of the most structurally dense models we've ever come across.
That's a big one.
It's called the Vajra circuit. It's this ancient map that claims to lay out the entire electrical geometry between, well, the human body and the cosmos.
Which is a huge claim. The idea that your consciousness isn't just in the universe, but is electrically synced with it.
Exactly.
And the source material, it splits this circuit into 3 distinct nested layers. To really get our heads around it, we have to start at the bottom. The foundational layer.
The pure energy axis.
The scaffolding for, well, everything.
Okay, let's start there. This first layer is called the vertical puncture, or the tensegrity axis. And it supposedly exists before any physical reality, before what the sources call a pocket dimension.
Right, and tensegrity is the key word there. In engineering, it's a structure built from tension, not compression.
So it's a structural concept.
It's a conceptual scaffold, but it describes a force-free electrical flow, a perfectly tensioned, non-physical axis defined by 2 main terminals.
And these terminals, they immediately equate the macrocosm and the microcosm.
Right out of the gate. At the top, you have the Brahmarandra, the exit valve. It's the white drop boundary, and it equates the sun with the body's crown.
Okay.
And at the bottom, there's the Kunda, the fractal section. This is the red drop boundary, linking the Earth's core directly to your body's root.
That is a radical claim. So this isn't a metaphor. They mean it's an actual electrical connection.
The sources are explicit. It's electrical. And there's a third point, which is crucial. It sits off that vertical line. The Hrdaya Guhya, or the secret heart, the entry point for what they call the paralogos.
And the physics of this.
The whole layer is force-free. It's a pure rotational plasma flow, a Birkeland current. The sources just call it the avadhuti. No parts, just pure potential.
So if layer 1 is this perfect frictionless voltage, how do we get messy biological reality out of that? You know, the part where things collide and decay.
That's the dilemma, right. And that's the problem that layer 2, the transformer grid, is designed to solve. That pure current has to be stepped down. Layer 2 is the 7-fold Mayama layer, the middle layer. This is the actual pocket dimension, where the 5 skandhas, The elements of our experience actually exist.
And how is it created?
It's created when that raw Avadhuti current hits something called the Vach filter. This filter refracts the current into 7 specific Bessel nodes.
And those nodes are our chakras.
Exactly. They act like 90-degree transformers. So instead of that pure vertical flow, the chakras take the current and broadcast it horizontally. Yeah. That's what sustains our biological form.
And the organs are grown from these nodes?
Yeah, the Bessel prongs, the physical result. The sources give examples like Anahata, the heart, corresponds to the sun. Manipura is Mars, governing the liver, your digestive fire, your metabolism.
Yeah.
Ajna is Jupiter, the brain's command center.
The biggest difference between these layers, then, seems to come down to one single concept: friction.
It's all about friction.
Yeah.
This is the key insight. Layer 2 is where friction happens, and the sources have a word for that friction: karma. These 7 nodes, they're necessary interference patterns. They add resistance to step down that raw voltage. Without them, you just, burn out the fuse. No friction, no physical life.
And this all leads to the big reveal in the sources. The reason your organs seem to sync with planets is because the solar system is a body.
It's a recursive map.
Yeah.
If you look at the macro level, the sun isn't just some star. It's acting as our system's Brahmarandra. It's the white hole.
And the Earth.
The Earth is our system's Kunda, the red pond. And planets like Mars and Jupiter, they're the system's own chakras. It's organs.
Which explains that detail they give about reaching certain thresholds, like in the DMT or acid state.
Yes. They say the local madhyama, that's your organs, starts to synchronize with the macro madhyama, the planets.
So you stop seeing them as distant objects.
You actually feel them as your own biological functions, the full electrical merge of yourself and the cosmos.
So to just quickly recap for everyone listening, we've moved from that fundamental force-free vertical axis
down into the horizontal friction-laden transformer grid that steps down the power to create our reality.
A system built on energy exchange, which the sources define as karma.
Right. So since this whole middle layer, our life, our organs, our experience, is defined by friction, by karma, it makes you think. What does it mean that the true absolute center, the Hrdaya Guhya, the secret heart, is part of that force-free fundamental layer? What kind of action or what kind of existence is even possible in the true center, where there is zero friction? That, I think, is the real space to explore.
All right, welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into some really technical material. It's from the Dausal Code Podcast 5, the Bessel Dorje array.
And our mission here is to basically unpack this dense model of spiritual attainment, one that ties consciousness directly into physics, and make it something you can actually use.
Yeah, and the first thing that just jumps out is how it completely rejects the old way of thinking. This idea of energy moving like water through a pipe.
Exactly. Forget that. That whole concept of a slow, linear journey with, friction and blockages. The source material just throws it out entirely.
So if it's not a transmission of energy, what is it? What's the core mechanism here?
That's the instantaneous phase lock. That's the key term. They call the event precipitation.
An instantaneous phase lock. Okay, what does that mean in simple terms?
Think of it like a radio. The music, which the source calls the City of Brahma blueprint, it's always broadcasting. You don't have to go get the song.
You just have to tune your receiver to the right frequency.
Precisely. You align your internal system until you hit what they call zero impedance. And at that moment, the signal just materializes. It precipitates. No journey, just a tuning.
Zero impedance. I love that. But okay, to get that perfect tuning, you need to understand the hardware. So let's break down this Bessel Dorje array. Where do we start?
We start with the foundation, the vertical axis. They call it the fundamental layer or the absolute tripod.
Okay.
At the very bottom, you have the kunda, the root. But it's not a grounding cord. This is critical. It's a terminal of suction.
Wait, suction, not grounding. That's a huge difference.
It's a total reversal. It's actively drawing in the planetary torsion of the Earth.
What exactly is a torsion field in this context?
Simply put, it's energy that twists space-time. The source says the Earth's core generates this constantly, and the kunda is how your personal system plugs into that raw power.
Right. So the base is suction. What's in the middle of this axis?
In the center is the Hrdaya Guhya, the secret heart. It's described as a needle puncture point. This is where the vertical energy projects out horizontally in a 90-degree spray of light.
And that spray is the manifestation. That's potential becoming actual.
That's the precipitation in action. And at the top, you have the Brahmarandra, the crown, which acts as an exit valve. It connects you to the solar and galactic scale.
Okay, so we have this powerful vertical axis. But what about the chakras, the 7 centers? This model seems to treat them very differently.
Very differently. In this Madhyama layer, the middle layer, they aren't energy centers. They're Bessel nodes, just stable interference patterns created by that main axis.
So just echoes almost.
In a way, and this is where it gets really wild, they introduce planetary correspondence. Every major organ in your body is a Bessel prong that extends from one of these nodes.
A battle prong.
Yes, your heart, your liver, they're local planetary organs. Your heart corresponds to the sun, your liver to Jupiter, and so on, all inside your personal energy field.
That's incredible. So does that mean organ failure is a Bessel mismatch? Like my heart is literally falling out of tune with the solar frequency.
That is precisely it. And that leads directly to how you can apply this. We're talking about biological tuning.
So you can, retune an organ?
Using focused intention or even sound to bring that organ's prong back into its proper planetary frequency. You're restoring its coherence with the main axis.
It's not a metaphor then, it's actual frequency adjustment.
It's presented as literal. And for everyday use, there's zero impedance awareness. By focusing on that central needle puncture, the Hrdaya Guhya, you activate that 90-degree spray to resolve emotional static instantly.
So it's a way of grounding yourself against all that digital noise we're all swimming in.
Yeah, but instead of pushing roots down, you're syncing with that planetary torsion coming up. It's a much more active, stable connection.
Wow. So when you boil it all down, this isn't mapping a spiritual quest. It's describing consciousness as a kind of cosmic engineering, a precise geometric operation.
And maybe the most important thought the source leaves you with is this. You are not a separate person trying to get somewhere. You are, right now, a fully integrated node in a Bessel Dorje array.
So alignment isn't a journey at all.
It's just a change in phase, an instantaneous shift in tuning. You're already there.